So I want to thank you for all for coming. I hope you're all excited to rev up the full potential of your institution with this event in the Gray Accelerator series featuring webinars and appearances on the Grow, Grow, Grow podcast. We will start off by sharing this month's higher education data trends, and then switch over to an exciting discussion on accelerating graduation rates through student-centered scheduling. Our presenter today will be Bob Atkins, Gray's CEO, program evaluation expert, and best-selling higher education author. He will be joined by Sarah Collins from Astra and David Short of Lamar University. They will share their experiences with growth and some practical advice for you all. A few housekeeping items to get started with, if you don't mind. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a place labeled Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during this session, and we can certainly follow up later with you if we run out of time. You can also chat with presenters in the chat section. You will receive a link to the webinar recording and presentation slides. Please look for it in your email after the presentation. Now, without further ado, I will turn things over to Bob.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, Marianne. As Marianne mentioned, I'm Bob Atkins. I'm delighted to be with you today. And with me, I have a couple of folks who I think you'll look forward to hearing from. Sarah, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation to speak on this webinar today. My name is Sarah Collins. I am with Astra, one of the leading higher education academic planning and scheduling solutions in the market. And I am Astra's president.
And David?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I'm David Short. I'm the University Registrar at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas.
So I am having a little bit of trouble with sharing, but I'm going to give it another crack here, and hopefully we'll be all set. For some reason, my screen decided to go wonky 1 minute before we got started up. But today we're going to share a little bit about Gray, just as an introduction for those of you who don't already know us. Then we'll walk into this month's results in terms of what's growing and shrinking in higher ed.
Well, folks, it looks like we continue to have some technical problems here. Monica, do you happen to have the presentation? We can put that back up until we get Bob back.
Yes, and now I have it, so I will put it in 1 second.
Great. And if anyone knows any good jokes while we get that squared away, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll be happy to share them with everyone.
Well, this is... Okay, let me get it in. Okay, able to see it?
We are, and welcome back, Bob.
Yes, I seem to have, after my 300th webinar, I seem to have completely forgotten how to run Zoom. I apologize to everybody. I'm back, and next chart, Monica. And in fact, after that. So briefly about Gray, we have developed what we call a complete program evaluation system. PES, or program evaluation system, is an inclusive data-informed evaluation process. It's not just software or data. We believe that it needs to cover 4 broad areas: markets, that is what students want, what employers need, who the competition is, and what degree level is appropriate for a given program. Then you need to understand your margins, not because we're trying to achieve profitability in most institutions, but we certainly need to achieve sustainable financials. And on top of that, we need to generate the margins in some programs to cover others that can't stand on their own 2 feet, but which are central to the mission of the institution. And then, of course, we have this thing, academic standards, which I think most of you hold pretty near and dear. And we need to address those things, understand what the metrics are. Are we graduating the students? What are their continuation rates? Are they passing relevant exams like the NCLEX for nurses and so forth? So, and then all of that needs to be consistent with the mission of the institution. Now, many of you have heard about all the hoo-ha with AI right now. In fact, probably all of you. I have some bad news. Artificial intelligence cannot yet tell you what academic programs to offer. There's no algorithm that will answer this question for you. It requires your judgment, and it requires a sound process that involves the right people in your organization. So much that we love numbers, we can't give you, nor do we think if we could, it would be appropriate, a machine that will solve this problem for you. You do need the data, you do need the software to inform your decisions, but you also need judgment and involvement of the right people. So next chart. Monica?
I'm trying. Yeah, let's see.
On that page to make the click. So we'll cover today's student demand and some leading indicators on that, employment. Then we'll touch on a little bit of benchmarking, and we'll talk about how to accelerate performance and improve graduation rates through scheduling. Next. So first things first, in many cases, people's perception of what's going on in higher ed is limited by things like iPads, which is quite an old data set. The newest data just came out for what is it now, 2022, a few days ago. But that represents decisions people made when they chose their major 3 to 5 years before they graduated. So we like to look at some more current things. We also look at iPads to understand what's going on right now. And Google search volumes is one indicator, somewhat of a forward-looking indicator in the sense that people are searching for a program or an institution on Google, are planning to go to school. They're not there yet. And so it gives you a sense of how interest is going to change over time as we look forward. Right now, it's looking encouraging after several years of declines. I think all of you have been through. We're finally seeing some growth in these indicators. August is up 4% versus January this year. And as many of you know, January is usually a big month for search volumes for higher ed. So I'm encouraged to see that we're seeing that kind of growth during the summer, which is often a little slow. So it's encouraging. Next. What's growing? A few things here are growing much, much faster than the norm. So recall that the average is 4%, are the number one program in terms of growth among programs at least 10,000 searches. So we haven't got tiny programs in here. Was digital marketing up 262%. So inbound students are very interested in that particular discipline. I think this is the creator economy manifesting itself, and all those students who believe they have the opportunity to become influencers, and actually many of them will. Then we have health, education, and fitness up 205%. We have a couple of more what I would call trades or career and technical programs, sterile processing tech in particular, and allied health services. And then we see AI making the list. I don't recall seeing this previously, but up 75% at this time. So if I went back a year, this wouldn't have been on people's radar screens. Business analytics up 71%. That's been a regular here. Medicine up 41%. Environmental science, all our concerns about global warming are stimulating student demand there. Then some more what I would call bread and butter kinds of business programs, project management. And finally, cybersecurity. I'm going to spend a second on this one because it's an interesting example. Oftentimes people think that competition in higher ed, in a sense, it weakens the attractiveness of a program. But in my experience, the programs that are most financially advantageous, the fastest growing, are also almost always the most competitive. So it's not at all clear to me that competition is bad. And many of you know, almost everybody has a cybersecurity program right now. I think that's pretty true. It's why I got one of the highest representations across campuses, still growing 29%. Next. So unfortunately, along with growth often comes, as I mentioned, competition. So here are a handful of the programs that have the actually highest cost to buy a click for on Google. So as many of you know, when people are out there on the internet going through and looking for things, they'll click down and Google's happy to charge you for that click if you want to get the results of that advertising. Over here on psychology, general, and middle school teaching, a click will cost you $40 or more. Now, that doesn't sound bad. If you could click and get a student, that'd be a hell of a deal. But that's not really how it works. About 1 in every 100 of these clicks, optimistically speaking, will turn into a student. So that's really a $4,000 cost per student enrolled when you see that $40 price tag. In the middle, we have some that are a little less extensive, but still pretty rich: criminal justice, social work, health services administration, and accounting and business management. And on the right, we're still very expensive. These are the top 10 at over $30 here: human services, sport fitness administration, information technology, and finally accounting. So these are places where people are spending a lot of money to try and acquire a student. What did they get in return for that spending? What kind of enrollment are we seeing? When we look at fall combined with spring 2022-23, new enrollment at the bachelor's level is down. I was sort of hoping we'd seen the end of this, particularly when we saw this uptick a little in some of the more recent data. But bachelor's is back to a very small decline. I suppose in a way that's good news after these very rapid declines a few years ago. We look at the master's level though, and I think there's reason to believe that the bloom is a bit off the rose at the graduate level. This has been a good growth area for many institutions for a while, and now we're seeing very rapid declines in the new enrollment in bachelor's programs, 9% in fall combined with spring 2022-23. So within that, there are some much larger programs. And so I thought I'd give you a sense of what had the highest new enrollment. Not surprising, we see business at the very top of the list. I'm a little surprised to see nursing falling to 4th. Honestly, I've seen this program be number 1 or number 2, typically number 2 behind business. It seems to be drifting back a bit. We have biology and a couple of other STEM fields here in the top 10. With 661,000 new enrolls, computer science with 51,000, 23,000 in engineering, and 22,000 for mechanical engineering. So STEM actually has the highest representation of any group of programs on this list. Mentioned nursing, so we do have a couple of health programs here, and kinesiology is the other one. And then just a grab bag of other things. I mentioned business, psychology, criminal justice, and finance general. One other thing to keep in mind when you look at these numbers, 115,000 new enrolls, is how that compares to the median program out there. These are extremely large. The median program has 179 new enrolls. So these are 1,000 times bigger than those programs. I think that's right. Now, what's growing? I mentioned cybersecurity earlier. This one's been growing for a while. What surprised me with cyber is that despite now being quite a large program, it continues to grow at double-digit rates, and it's been the fastest growing program for some time. We have several other STEM programs, though, here as well: computer science, neuroscience, and aerospace engineering, and environmental science, all coming in here positive growth in the low single digits. Health has 2 entries, allied health. I'm sorry, maybe I found out what's going on there. Allied health and kinesiology both made the list. And then a couple of others: finance general, marketing management, and education general. Monica? So when we shift up to the master's level and look at new enrollment, business is by far and away the largest with 67,000 new enrolls. Not surprising, this is our MBA program typically. That's the only business program that actually made, one of the business analytics that made the list. Health has a couple of entries here, social work and healthcare administration management. And then we have education, finally finding a spot on these lists with special ed, education general, curriculum instruction, all with over 10,000 students each. And again, keep in mind how large these really are. We've got a median program here at 129, and I misspoke before. If I'm doing my math correctly, that's about, these are all 10 times as large, 100 times as large as that, not 1,000. So what's growing at the master's level? Business analytics. And I'm afraid too that this is probably cannibalizing traditional business programs. Then we have a number of things in the computing area: information technology, computer science, information science studies, and computer engineering general. Do keep in mind that in many of these tech spaces, the enrollment is predominantly international. It varies by individual program. Computer software, for example, is 90% international students at the master's level, not at the undergraduate level. And that's because they can get a STEM visa, and that gives them 3 years of work after college instead of just 2. So it's a very attractive visa for international students. And if you're thinking about the size and growth in these areas, to capture the real opportunity here, you have to have a very good international presence. We've also got a couple of STEM programs: engineering and aerospace engineering. And health is represented here with 3 programs: mental health counseling, applied behavior analysis, and physician assistant. Monica? Coursera is, let me switch gears now. We've been talking about what I would call traditional programs, 4-year programs, master's programs, but a lot of interest has shifted over, as I think all of you know, to very short courses and so forth. And the question then is, okay, well, in these short courses, what are people interested in? So we mine Coursera data for this. And Coursera, as all of you probably know, is a MOOC, a massively online course delivery system with programs from all sorts of different institutions on different topics. These all tend to be pretty tech-focused, or computing-focused is probably a more precise way of saying it. And indeed, the largest one here in terms of growth is Foundations Data Everywhere. In the last 2 years, that program has had 1.7 million students enroll in it. It's really an astonishing number when you think back 5 years. I mean, there was nothing in the world that was this big 5 to 10 years ago. So it's really incredible growth. And keep in mind that that's 1.7 million students in 2 years. In fairness, also keep in mind that an enrollment here is not like an enrollment in a regular college, in the sense that they pay relatively little. Sometimes it's even free. And so the stickiness is very low. So out of those 1.7 million students, I would guess that a very solid minority, 10, 20, 30%, didn't make it through the first class section. So it's a different environment. 1.7 million is not the same as 1.7 million students enrolled in traditional universities. Still an enormous number. And it does give you an indication of what people are interested in when they're looking at these shorter courses and certificates. Second is science of well-being, often called happiness. And that's been a staple in the top 2 in terms of popularity for quite some time. Then when we start to look down these things that aren't tech, learning how to learn, self-improvement kinds of things, introduction to psychology, and starting a successful project, all amongst the 10 most popular. And then the core computing things, foundations of user experience, technical support fundamentals, crash course on Python, process data from dirty to clean, and JavaScript. And these, as I say, these platforms tend to attract techies, and many of the programs are computing. In fact, if you went over to Udemy, it would be almost solid computing programs. So huge amount of interest in relatively quick training in computing, but some good interest in things that I would call closer to the humanities, on things like science of well-being. Monica? One of the things that happens on these platforms is the folks are particularly careful to make sure that the things that they're teaching are directly meeting the needs of employers. Why? Because many of them are employers, and they're on these platforms in a very self-serving way to try and teach people what they need in order to get hired by Google, or in fact, to train people at Google and what they may need to take. So you look at the skills learned in this program, and they align very carefully with the skills that we find in job postings, whether that's procurement or change management or process improvement. You know, they've designed this to exactly address what employers needs. Now, I'm not sure every college or university wants to be that vocationally oriented, but it is, I think, a very good concept to say, okay, let's at least understand what employers are looking for and cover out as many of those as we can, consistent with the intent of the program and the institution, to make sure that our students have the training that they need when they go out into the workforce. And this is an area of development for us. I think in the next 6 months, we'll be able to help you examine the artifacts, if you will, in your educational institution to determine what skills are being taught and help you assess whether those skills are align well with the workplace. Next chart. Now let's take a quick look at employment, and I'm sure many of us follow this in the newspapers. I know I do. You know, what we're going to see here is consistent with what you've been reading in the press. First of all, last year, the dark blue line boxes here on the chart was a very big year because we were bouncing back from COVID. So those are, if you will, unnaturally high numbers. This year, we're down from that. And these numbers are pretty consistent with what we saw back in 2019, pre-COVID. You'll also notice, let's go to the next chart, that, you know, year over year, we're down 26%. That sounds awful, but as I say, don't overinterpret that. We're coming down off an artificial high. And then you look at the last few months, and we're actually, next chart, we're actually looking at a pretty stable environment, down just 2.3% since April. And, you know, the Fed is still working on bringing these numbers down further. But from what I've seen, the job market remains very healthy. So where's the growth? And even in this declining environment, or I should say the largest, general and operations managers. So I think one of the interesting things about this is that's a job almost anybody with a bachelor's degree can strive for over the course of their career. Now, you're not going to be a general manager the day you walk on the job, but many people with what I would call a liberal arts education will end up in that particular slot. Obviously, registered nursing, very different, very precise training required. And then you see all the other places that people, that where there's interest right now, we're hiring back secretaries. We need support specialists. We need teachers, production workers, first-line supervisors, HR specialists to manage all this hiring, and then marketing and sales managers are the biggest jobs right now in the job in terms of number of job postings. What are the highest volumes? Some areas that I have to admit I don't find terribly stimulating at the top of the list: payroll and timekeeping clerks, and one that crops up around this time of year, tax preparers, and that'll be one of the top areas probably for the next 6 to 8 months as we roll into tax season. I can also tell you that there's a shortage of tax people. In general, it's actually hard to find an accountant who will do your taxes now because they don't have enough manpower to handle the customers they already have. So that's going to be an area of growth. I don't know how we get students interested in studying tax. It sounds awful to me, but to each his own. Then we see dentists, physical therapy assistants, psychiatric techs, bookkeepers, nurse practitioners, claims adjusters, and notice that by the time we get down to the 10th, we're down around 0% growth, which is to be expected in an environment where the average program, or excuse me, the average occupation is down some 26% year over year. One of the things we keep hammering on, and I'll try not to take too long on this, is an underlying fallacy in most traditional analyses of labor markets, and some of the systems that are out there do this too. They focus on what we call direct prep. So they assume that people are going to go do the things for which they are directly prepared. So nurses study nursing, and the expectation is they will go on to become nurses. Well, interestingly, nurses actually do that. A little under 80% of the time, a person who graduates from nursing school will become a nurse. But if you move to the other end of this chart, where it says 0 to 19%, and the 78% bar, if you will, for 78% of programs, 19% or fewer of the graduates are going to go into a field for which they're directly prepared. So 80% of the students are going to do something besides what labor market economists think they were directly prepared to do. Why does this matter? You can switch chart, Monica. Well, you know, if you're only supposed to go, and now we're looking at sociology, where the labor market economist says there are 4 jobs sociologists are trained to do, which is an interesting concept. I'm always entertained by the ones that they say history majors are supposed to do. because it's, similar for 4 or 5 things we're all supposedly trained for. But then you look at what sociology majors really do, and you find out that the story is quite different. Go to the next page. Sociology majors don't go into 4 occupations. They go into 851 occupations. So when I look at things like this and trying to say, well, is it close enough? If it's off by 10%, I'm good. If I have to multiply by over 100 to get to the right answer, that's probably not so good. And that's the case here. And sociology majors do all kinds of things. They become chief executives. They become human resources specialists, general operations managers. You'll notice I haven't mentioned one of the things for which they're directly prepared yet. And I believe none of those are even on this list. So the things that they're supposedly prepared to do are not even the top 10 of the things that they actually do. Why does this matter? Well, first of all, it helps to spread the misperception that many of these more liberal arts things have no jobs. If I go in and look for the jobs in the 4 categories I had on a prior page, I'm not going to find a whole lot. And as a result, people get glum about the opportunities for people like sociology majors or history majors, when in fact we go into all kinds of fields, and there are job opportunities for us, and the skills we learn is the other element, are relevant in the labor market. It's just they're often core skills, if you will, like communication and teamwork, as opposed to specialized disciplines or specialized tools that they've learned to use. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot more opportunity for most graduates than people know about. Next. So let's talk a little bit about a less fun topic than jobs, which is benchmarking curricular efficiency. I'll only take a minute here, and then I'm going to turn it over so we can talk about how to drive growth. What we see often in colleges is that the number of unique sections is fairly constant over time, but the number of student credit hours, and even more so the number of students, has been dropping. So in effect, we have fewer students and fewer student credit hours per section, i.e. we've got empty seats. And that's a problem. It drives up cost and damages institutional financials. I also think in many cases it erodes the quality of the experience for the student, especially when the course gets really small, under 5. It just doesn't, you don't have that same level of energy you might have in a larger class. Next chart. So how do you figure out what your cost should be? We believe that one of the areas to go to is fairly detailed benchmarking. And we keep benchmarks at the course and subject matter level, and also by course level. So it's course, subject matter, course level that we're looking at. So you're really getting apples to apples comparisons. And very quickly, you can go in and look at your benchmark cost and calculate out that number on the right here, cost over threshold, and find the areas where you're materially in excess of what one would expect in terms of cost of delivering this particular course and level. So this is a way of lasering in on the areas where there may be opportunity, keeping in mind that much like program evaluation, the numbers don't tell the whole story. It does require judgment. You have to go in and look and find out why we're teaching 5 sections to 28 students for this particular course. There may be a reason, but often there isn't. It's just we didn't clean up the schedule in time. So with that, let me turn it over to our colleagues, and love to hear about how you can manage your schedule to improve efficiency, and in particular to accelerate growth.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. So I'm joined today by my colleague and partner, David Short at Lamar University. And I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the growth opportunities within the course schedule. So first of all, I want to say that, Bob, the chart that you had up, I think 2 or 3 slides ago, I would absolutely echo that we are seeing exactly the same data trends and data points in our partners' data as well. So unique sections, or the number of classes that we teach, is flat, but the number of credit hours and the actual enrollments are declining. timing. And so there's obviously opportunity for efficiency inside of that narrative, but there is just as much opportunity for growth. So I'm excited to share those kinds of stories and opportunities with you today through Lamar University and through David's story. But before I do that, I just want to introduce Ad Astra. So Ad Astra is the trusted partner of over 550 colleges and universities in North America. We have been around 28, going on 29 years. Entered higher education. We're very, very niche in what you do. If you're familiar with us or if you're currently partner with Ad Astra, we are focused very much so on the course schedule. However, as time has gone on and we've moved past the kind of the fat and happy days of higher ed, where we had abundant resources and abundant students, the course schedule has actually become an opportunity to work very strategically. And so with a lot of the data that is both consumed and output through the management of the course schedule is very, very helpful in kind of strategic planning. We have more and more folks that are tying it to graduation initiatives, retention initiatives, re-enrollment initiatives, pathway initiatives, transfer initiatives, etc. So it's just a very, very rich place to kind of get in and get your hands dirty and use it strategically throughout the entire institution. So we also are going to talk a little bit about the opportunity within financial stability or sustainability. And Bob, that's exactly what you kind of mentioned is we can benchmark and we can look at the economics of the program. That's exactly what Gray's expertise is in, as well as other things. They really look at that external demand. What are students searching? What are employers looking to, what skills are employers looking to place? Ad Astra looks at the internal demand. So once you get that student in the door, what do they need to stay and progress and graduate? And that's really what our role is in the schedule. And doing that well has wonderful financial returns. So some of the things that we measure, and David's going to talk about as well, is we expect our partners to achieve these outcomes. We expect them to simultaneously, these are not at odds with each other. If this work is done well and the information, not just the data, but the information is put in the hands of the right people and action is taken, we see simultaneous outcomes from strategic course scheduling and academic planning. So one of them is accelerated completions. So many of the states and within systems, organizations and systems, there are performance metrics or performance funding even that are unlocked, dollars that can be unlocked through accelerating completions. So time to degree and then degrees awarded. This is a really good opportunity. This is we call it a structural barrier that can decrease the amount of credit students are taking. It can impact your attrition because students can't get, if students can't get the course that they need. And it can also accelerate your revenue, which is the story that Lamar University is going to talk about. So many of our institutions, our partners, and I think just in general, higher education, when they think about scheduling, this word efficiency is the word that comes up. I'm going to get more efficient with my scheduling. And certainly efficiency is an option or is an opportunity. So operational efficiency, just the amount of time it takes to put together a course schedule with thousands of sections that you're offering across tens and sometimes more academic units, the coordination of that, the work the registrar's office has to go through, the work the provost and their team have to go through, communicating with the deans, enrollment management, everybody's involved. It's a heavy lift. It can get operationally better through a collaborative platform and with more information presented, but it can also create efficiencies in just the overall spend of your academic enterprise. So that financial sustainability and efficiency is there, but it's also there because it can yield more dollars. There is a reason student credit hour loads are going down, and they don't have to. So if you think about all the changes we've been through in the last 3 years, and then you think about the course scheduling process on your campus, you're likely rolling forward a very similar schedule that you have been for many, many years. External demand is changing, programs are changing, internal demand is changing, but the course schedule isn't. If you can adjust that, you can see growth in credit hour loads. We see growth in enrollments. We see growth in tuition yield. We see all kinds of growth happening through strategic focus of the course schedule. And we see more equitable outcomes. So one of the things that we also track is we do look at the student level. So when Ad Astra is forecasting demand for courses at the universities that we partner with, they're looking at the individual students, they're looking at the programs that they're enrolled in, and they're looking at those students' progression through those programs. So we know exactly what they have taken and what they need to take. We know what modalities they've been taking classes in. We know what times of days they're taking classes. So all of that information can come together to help align and get ahead of the scheduling process, which then students respond at registration by clicking into those classes. And we see increasingly student credit hour loads go up with even the same or lower headcount at an institution. And that's really the story that David's here to tell you today, is there's so much opportunity in growing by aligning the course schedule with students. But let's start. David, why don't you tell us a little bit about Lamar?
You've got a lot of the highlights right there. We are a four-year university in Beaumont, Texas. We are part of the Texas State University system. We have around 17,000 students. A lot of those are first gen, 39% are first gen. We're at the point where more than half of our students are online and are in 100% online programs, and more than half of our credit hours are online. It's a unique group. As you can see, it's a lot of older than average students. So we're a school that has unique needs to fill.
Yeah, David, I think that's really important to kind of drop anchor on a minute, because this notion of a traditional student is, in my opinion, somewhat gone. You may be in pockets in small private liberal arts colleges or in certain areas, but many of our state institutions, if not the majority, I would say, are serving a post-traditional student profile, and that really matters in the course schedule, right? They have jobs, they have children, they're taking care of their elderly parents, they have competing needs, and you need to respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Even our traditional students, we're a low-income school. Most of our students are Pell eligible. So even those students who are traditional age probably are still supporting their families back home. So it's important that we build schedules that work for the students.
That's right. Exactly. So David, you had multiple goals or objectives when actually starting this work. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how Lamar decided that that course scheduling was important enough to put a focus on it, because it does take a lot of change management at a university to do this work, but the return is worth it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how Lamar jumped into the school?
Sure. I'll give a lot of credit to administration. 2 provosts back, we hired a guy who came in, and the very first thing in his interview was, do you have Ad Astra? Are you using it? No, let's get it. So, we didn't have to fight like a lot of schools do to get this culture change. He helped push it. But the idea was that we have a unique student population, and we had to build schedules that worked for their needs. Like everyone else, we were watching the trends and seeing enrollments go down across the nation. And one of our goals or ways to kind of counteract that was to hopefully increase student credit hours. We really pushed what we call 15 to finish, that, really trying to get all of our incoming students in 15 hours first semester and can continue that trend. But it's hard to do if all their classes are at the same time, or all the classes conflict with each other, or there's just not enough choices. So the hope was to get a schedule that was data driven, that was right sized to the students, and that would allow us to grow, if not enrollment, at least grow credit hours. And that's kind of what we've done.
Yeah, so that's great. So a couple of things I want to point out here that I think, well, first of all, we are seeing our partners trending this way pretty fast. A lot of changes, but one is these types of charges are often laid out in a university or college's strategic plan. So they're like 3-year, 5-year strategic plan. It's to increase student credit hours. It's to grow. It is to produce more graduates, et cetera, et cetera. And we're starting to see more kind of nesting under that. The strategy to do that is through better course scheduling. And that's because we have the data, we have the proof that you can achieve those outcomes incrementally, one semester at a time, continuing to increase through that work. So that's one thing I wanted to put a focus on. And go ahead, David.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So these were all components of Lamar's strategic plan, and course scheduling was kind of the underpinning of that. The second thing is that, we're kind of data rich and information poor. That's getting to be kind of an old flat saying. I get it. But that was one of the things that Lamar was feeling at that time, right? They really needed to enhance the systems and the metrics and the data to inform decision-making. And I'll just also mention that in the state of Texas in particular, a component of their funding from the state does come from space utilization. So they have something called the SU score is what they call it in Texas, but the space utilization something, David, equivalency, efficiency.
Space efficiency utilization. Or space utilization efficiency, yeah.
Efficiency, there we go. So SU, if you're from the state of Texas, you know what we're saying, which is very important. It's a critical part of their funding formula. And so having the ability to optimize the space and ensure that you're getting those metrics to report back to the state does impact the actual funding coming into the university.
And I'll say the SU score was one of the big drivers in the initial investment in at Astra. We're a school that saw the majority of our growth is online. So we have a large campus that continues to have fewer and fewer classrooms being used, and we needed to find a way to better use the space we had to kind of keep at least minimum standards for SU, if not improve.
Yeah, that's a great point on a couple of different notes, David. One is we've seen obviously since COVID, a huge shift in growth of online programming. And there's a lot to unpack in there. There is the utilization of your resources, which is very important, and many states are being measured on it. There is also the student outcomes in different modalities and really being able to track, our students, are DFW rates higher in some cases in online programming? And does it matter if the online programming is at the beginning of the program or more towards the end of the program? So, I think coupled with this course scheduling strategy, you also mentioned that you guys are very focused through advising and through communications and marketing on 15 to finish and early momentum, which are strategies that not only are our solution platform supports and tracks, but also our best practices are exactly that. And the most bottleneck courses are oftentimes in those first few years, and teaching them online isn't always the best return in those first 100 and 200. So it's really looking at that all the way, kind of looking at all those aspects.
Right.
So you want to talk a little bit about the progress you were making pre-COVID, and then we'll talk about kind of where we went from there. Obviously the big shift in growing online programs, but we can talk through all of that, David.
Sure. And I'll, preface this with, we have a monthly engagement with that Astra. We have a consultation call. So all these were benchmarks and goals that we set together with our partner. So in pre-COVID, we actually were starting to see some progress. We were growing our on-campus areas, particularly, and like the overloaded courses. We were seeing a lot fewer of them. And then COVID happened. But at least for us, luckily, we have a large online presence already, so that jump to purely online was not as difficult. So we didn't lose as much momentum as a lot of schools did. So you see, we still managed to hold on and hold the line in most areas. Just ultimately, we've continued to make growth, even if it's not large, even if it's not overwhelming. Small wins are better than no wins. And that's
That's
where
right.
it's just creeping growth.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And that's that's how we partner with our colleges and universities is looking at setting these goals term over term and really looking at, again, down to the level of how many sections were we able to add and fill? How are our fill rates within those sections? Can we improve those? So all those empty seats that Bob pointed out earlier, are we getting higher enrollments in those? Looking at cancellations, that's another big kind of interrupt to both the student and the faculty. When we have to cancel a course, we drop those credits. We lose those credits. The student loses a class, the faculty loses a class. It's just extremely disruptive. So really trying to do better management of have better management of cancellations is a huge objective as well.
Absolutely. And I'll say they're like pre-engagement with Astra. Our cancellation process was like the week before classes started. So those faculty who thought they were full-time instructors who lose their class a week before school starts and it's too late to add another, they generally weren't happy. So for us moving that forward and having better data to say this class is not going to make, let's go ahead and find you another section or let's add to other areas, that was a nice way to kind of get an in with faculty.
Yeah. Agreed. They're game because it does disrupt them. And I will say that also all of these data points, so it says 45 sections reduced. We do work with our partners to map that to dollars. How much was that instruction? We can work with Gray to identify the cost of that program or the financial opportunity. We can work with the university itself to identify what the average cost is to run a section and if there's reductions. But we're here today to talk about growth. And so that really is also mathed to dollars. What is the additional tuition yield that the university was able to receive had they not added classes that continued to fill? So now post-COVID, so 2021 to present, you want to talk a little bit about what things look like today?
Like you can see here, and I mentioned a while ago, about half of our classes are now online. Our credit hours are online, and some of that's deliberate. We are still trying to push students to on campus and, to be fair, push faculty back to campus, but we're getting there. Where we're really starting to dive in is that second bullet point is looking at the best pathways for our students to graduate and the aha moment of building a schedule for each of those types of students. That's where we're really starting to dig in now. This semester forward, that's kind of our goal, is revamp all of our curriculum. It's been exciting and we haven't had as much pushback as I've expected. I think partially because of earlier wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So two things that Lamar is doing here that I see pretty, I would call them trends. I'm starting to see more pervasive adoption of these strategies. One is the analysis of completion paths, and in part that is because Ad Astra does that organically as part of its technology solution. So it is kind of an Ad Astra term, but if you think about it in kind of plain English, a completion path is the way a student or a cohort of students are progressing through the course schedule to get a degree. So what campus they're taking classes on, what time of day they're taking classes, what modality they're taking classes in by program, and then kind of juxtaposing the course schedule with that. So you see them doing these trends, but sometimes they're having to jump around or they fall out and take fewer courses in a semester because the classes aren't being taught in that kind of path that they're taking classes in. And so that is especially true if you are an institution serving that kind of post-traditional student because of jobs, because of other competing priorities. And so the opportunity to really be able to use the course schedule as a marketing tool to kind of promise to students, hey, we're going to be able to offer classes in this program of study on this campus in the evening guaranteed the classes you need will be taught there, then that is a very powerful recruitment and enrollment statement for students, and helps a ton with retention as well.
And to give you a lot of credit, we have our completion paths, but you've done a great job of identifying blockages in the paths. So for a BA ASL student that's purely evening, you've been able to identify, hey, this English class is never taught in the evening, so we know where the problems are. So we know where the student can't finish a course on their preferred path, and that gives us a choice or opportunity to address that, and hopefully, again, increase those hours.
Yeah, exactly. The other one I want to mention is just annual, like multi-term scheduling. That is becoming, again, something that I'm seeing more pervasively adopted. The ability to schedule more than one term out from more than one term out. So that's important. So one of the key things, the story here for Lamar is through monitoring registration, additional enrollments yielded over $500,000 in revenue in one academic term. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you did that and how you worked with your faculty to accomplish that?
Sure thing. And to go a little background there, this started with a new provost who said, what is this Astra thing and why are we spending so much money on it? And that usually leads to the, oh no. So my first thought was, I just need to justify why we're using this, and let me just see if I can get their cost out of just what we're doing in registration. So that's why I actually started tracking. Otherwise, might not have had this. So we do monitor registration through the Astra application. The best part is you can set notifications on the classes you're really worried about. And rather than having to go in every day and dig and look at it, it just pings you an email in the morning, says, hey, this class is high registration. This class is full. So, the courses I know are the biggest risk, I don't have to keep going in. I just am told when they hit that. So I just started using that, and rather than try to build new sections, which costs money and requires faculty, is harder to do at the point of registration, just took the simple route of, hey, this accounting course is full, but it's capped at 25 and room holds 28. Hey, and just started bumping the capacity of those rooms or those courses to fill the room. And really just what I call nibbling at the edges there, managed to get growth and fill in enough classes to get that $500,000 budget point. So it's really just monitoring registration, reacting to it, and not making big jumps, just making small little adjustments to the existing schedule. So it was an easier win for faculty. I didn't put any strain on department chairs, pushing them for new faculty when registration is already underway, and it's a lot harder to get things. It was a simple, hey, I can get you 3 more students if you don't care. Yeah, great. So a lot of that was just, one, respecting their limits. As you mentioned in the previous slide, there are some courses that have hard caps because of pedagogy. This communication class, every student has to give 3 speeches. Well, you can't do that with 50 students, in a 16-week. It's just not enough time. So, respecting the courses that were hard capped because they're writing intensive or presentation intensive, and listening to them and, respecting that, and just continue to have conversations with them about what their needs were, where their hard caps were, what their concerns were, and just slowly built onto that. Like, okay, see, I didn't hurt anything. You said, okay, and I gave you more. Your classes keep making. And it was just building reputation with faculty, building, positive trust. And it allows me to now, if I need more sections, they listen, they understand, and they're more willing to add that extra section if I tell them, hey, we really need this. Because the small wins early were, hey, give me 3 seats, I'll fill them. Give me 10 seats, I'll fill them. And I did. Now they believe me a little bit more, and now they're willing to listen and make those adjustments faster.
Yeah. And so, this is what I call kind of low hanging fruit, right? This is just kind of sitting here, and it is a good way to start, and it is a good way to get returns.
That's low hanging fruit if you can. But I was chatting with one of my clients yesterday at a big university, probably not that much bigger than yours, David. And, they couldn't possibly make these kinds of real-time adjustments with the systems they have.
Right.
Just not possible.
Yeah. So, and that's where, where data, like the data is there, but it's the presentation of the data so it can be actionable in the moment. Like that's critical. Yeah, that's a great point.
So low-hanging fruit, if you've got a fox that can jump really high,
There you go. It's easily done if you have the right tools, for sure.
Right.
So a few other outcomes that I think are really impressive. And again, keep in mind that $500,000, that is one semester. We always our mantra is our partners should realize their return on their investment with our partnership by at least 3x, and that is a low bar. We need to be we push for higher than that. And so that is one semester, and that was really through monitoring the registration process to add additional to raise the cap in strategically identified courses and sections. David, you want to talk a little bit more about some of the outcomes?
We're coming up to time. Do you want to do any Q&A?
Sure.
We have a few. One of the questions is, as you move forward, is this going to be is this a system that Ad Astra needs to really help David manage, or is he going to be able to do that independently?
David, I'm going to let you answer that.
I can completely do this on my own. The engagement with Astra is useful, particularly if I have questions or as they continue to introduce new pieces to the software. But this isn't something that requires a lot of interaction or intervention from the other side. It's very user-friendly. It's very self-explanatory, and I can pretty much do this on my own.
Yeah, I will say that we do. It's just nice to have the kind of the brain power in the room to think about how to apply it and where there's opportunity.
Yep.
Does the module build out costs while it's being while you're developing the schedule?
So that's a really good question. So if I'm understanding it correctly, so our latest iteration of integrated planning, which is kind of a newer module to our suite of solutions, will allow you to put some kind of more back of the napkin math in the software, and it will start to show you the tally essentially of where you have where your costs are getting to, and also the other side of that, which is the revenue side of that.
That'll be a very interesting place for us to work together.
That's right. That's right. So sharing that information, actually, so Gray has the actual costs is what I call them. They are the true costs and the economics of those programs. Ad Astra wants cost information simply for the purpose of schedule planning. That is it, right? So if we can backport that from Gray, if we can get back of the napkin math from the institution, it absolutely helps with decision making in the scheduling process.
Yeah, and we can also provide the revenue associated with that schedule as well, you know, with an interaction there. So I think there's lots of opportunity to tie the more abstract layer of program portfolio management to the schedule where that portfolio is made manifest, if you will.
That's right.
There's lots of data that we each have that I think could give colleges really good insight into the economics of their programs in a dynamic way where they can actually make interventions like David's making, you know, in real time to make changes. So
that's exactly right.
Exciting things to come.
And we say scheduling is the operationalizing of your curriculum, right? That's actually where you roll it out. So that's where your opportunity is.
Where the rubber meets the road.
Where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we are out of time. Was there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I'm just, I just do want to iterate that we really work with our partners. Some come in and really they just want the basic blocking and tackling, but the universities tend to mature in the way they address and think about course scheduling. And that's the story you're hearing from David right now. You start out as basically just kind of we got to get a schedule done, but this really, you can grow with this and really get to a very strategic point, an integrated point across the institution if you do it well.
There's a request to see a screenshot or two. Is that possible, David, or shall we send that out separately?
I don't have it up on this PC, so I'll be glad to send you a couple if they would like me to.
And I would be happy to too. That one back in here is a screenshot of the application, but there are several others, and certainly you can reach out through Gray or directly to Ad Astra. If this is shared, there is also hyperlink to some resources that you could download.
Great. And if you don't mind, we'll reshare, Monica, if you can bring up our chart, just to remind people about our upcoming webinars, and grow. So thank you guys very much. As you can tell from this webinar, one of the focuses for Gray going forward is on this whole question of growth and how to do it, and where to get the money from. And I think those two things are intricately interwoven. We believe most colleges are going to have to find the money in their existing expense budget. And one of the ways you do that is to run that the educational part of the operation more efficiently. And certainly scheduling is a component of that. Then in effect, you're going to recycle that money into marketing, admissions, and programs that can lead to growth. But those are only some of the growth drivers. I really am on a crusade to dispel these myths about higher ed, and that, woe is me and the sky is falling, and there are not enough students left out there to go to college. And so I should just be okay that my enrollment's drifting down. Colleges don't work well on declining enrollment. The numbers just don't work. And a component of that that's important, I think, for many people is that it also doesn't work if you try and fix the problem by just cutting cost. There's too much fixed cost in higher ed to have that work. So we're really championing this concept of growth, and in a very tactical way, talking to people who have grown, finding out what they've done, sessions like this where people have used something that I would think of as, I would have thought it's purely operational to actually drive growth. So there are dozens of these levers. And I look forward to sharing those with you over time, both in terms of what the tactics are, and then also the companies that can help you achieve those results, like at Astra, Rise, and Evidence in Motion, who we'll be talking with over the next few weeks. So please join us. Delighted to share some of these ideas with you. I have a podcast on this as well, predictably enough, called Grow. If you want to flip the chart, you're welcome to listen to the podcast and get the ideas. And these are not my ideas. Unfortunately, you won't have to listen to me drone on. These are actual practitioners who've managed to grow their institutions in really a wide number of very creative ways. So I would encourage you to listen and hope that it helps all of you restore enrollment growth at your institutions. So